Hello, friends. Did you think you were? Probably not. My streaming software is being configured right now, so just bear with me. So yeah, you guys probably thought I died of COVID or something, but no, I just we just moved. I'm living in a house now. Unfortunately, it's a house from the 1800s. I mean, not that I'm complaining, it's actually probably one of the most awesome houses I've ever lived in. And I'm totally loving it. I've got like my laboratory, my dream laboratory finally set up. By the way, I'm really sorry about the buffering and stuff. I'm a lot farther away from the local internet hub of my service provider, so instead of a second download, I'm getting like one. So my connection is really poor. So I don't even know if streaming is going to work in here. I apologize for that in advance. I'm actually going to be upgrading my service soon from DSL to a point-to-point wireless that will give me 10 megabits a second apparently. And then I'll be able to do like regular stuff again without any serious problems. Oh yeah, in addition to not having died of COVID, I am now fully vaccinated, and I'm not super political. I mean, actually, yeah, I am super political. Never mind. Please, if you have the opportunity, get vaccinated. Let me just tell you, like a lot of people, I should start by saying vaccinations in the modern age have become inexplicably controversial. I'm a scientist. I believe in science. Everything that we have in the modern world that's worthwhile, I would say intellectually as well as physically, is almost all exclusively the product of science. But here's the most compelling argument, I think, of all time for getting vaccinated, whether it's a flu shot or the COVID vaccine or any other vaccine that you might get. Of course, there's always risks. That's reality. But what's also reality is that the risks are statistically so low that unless you're like really unlucky, you're going to be fine. By the way, I'm just looking for a sim to explore, but because my bandwidth is so low, it's taking like 100 times longer than usual. But I'm planning on just kind of like talking today while I explore and not really like focusing as much on the sims or whatever. God, I really just need to pick one of these and go in blind. But so here's the most compelling reason to get. Wow, there's a lot of people out here in the middle of no water, so I wonder if it's like underwater. Let's see if we can go there. Exuzoa, I guess is what this is called. Yeah, I'm getting a little off topic here. Oh, it's just like a underwater nothingness. Some very utterly minor terraforming. the most compelling reason by far to get vaccinated for COVID or whatever is because you've already been vaccinated many, many times, unless you're like some kind of Appalachian hippie child living out in the Black Hills in a tin shack and have never even seen a television. Basically, all babies in the modern era are vaccinated. You know, polio, smallpox, mumps, measles, uh, tetanus. By the time you're like 10 years old, you've had dozens of vaccinations, and for good reason. Vaccinations have saved probably hundreds of millions of lives since the technology first became like widely adopted. And why would you throw that away? Why would you deny yourself the opportunity to be statistically more likely to survive? Beats the hell out of me. And people are just like really not trusting. I mean, I'm a conspiracy theorist to some degree. Like, I have subscribed to a lot of conspiracy theories, but I mean, we're in a world nowadays where like crazy, absolutely batshit crazy stuff like QAnon goes mainstream, and that's like incomprehensible to me. I mean, there are lots of conspiracy theories that are plausible where there's a lot of supporting evidence, but the fact that there are conspiracy theories nowadays that have absolutely no credence whatsoever, and yet hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes even millions of people, subscribe to these conspiracy theories is just kind of mind-boggling. And I'd have to say, like, all the vaccine conspiracy theories fall into that category. It just kind of defies any sort of rational comprehension of why people would, you know, go that route. Alright, Kabuki Creations, gonna try this. Yeah, welcome to my long rant about vaccines. But yeah, please get vaccinated if you can. I mean, you know why there's so many problematic, it's just some kind of like strip mall. Kabuki Creations, of course, it's like obviously a shop of some sort. Wow, I'm getting like no bandwidth whatsoever. I'm gonna be ghost walking all over this sim. Yeah, the reason a lot of I should say the reason there's traction for vaccine-related conspiracy theories. I'm a person who gives a fair shake to all this shit, even insanity, and the truth is, some bad things have happened in so-called third world countries because of vaccines. But no. Let me be completely honest about this. It's not about the vaccines. It's about people. There were people who made some really bad decisions, and mainly because, well, I mean, it's a combination of the fact that the third world, it's not like the first world. Wow, straight up porno. It's a lot more fast and loose, and the value of human life, especially if you're like an affluent, Jesus, it's just nothing but porno. If you're like an affluent first world agency, or like the United Nations even, which is fairly eclectic and has a lot of, you know, diverse backgrounds, diverse ages and stuff. Hey, I'm Um, even that being the case, sorry, this seems too boring for me. I'm going back to the map. Even given that, there's sort of like this. Well, I mean, just think about a culture or you're not a stakeholder. I hate to use this like neo-political nomenclature, but like anytime you're an outsider going into a different world, your attitude towards those people are not going to be the same as if you're in your own world. Try this Evernest art. Sounds promising. And you're likely going to have sort of like biases or disregard, unless you're like an absolutely amazing person, just like brimming with compassion, which quite frankly is not the most common trait in human beings. But I mean, if you are one of those people, you may be naturalized almost immediately, and you're just like, these are my people, and I care about these people like they're my brothers and sisters. And that is a beautiful thing if that is real and can happen. But otherwise, you're going to be like, oh, these are just people that I'm trying to help in some way. They are not as smart as me. They're not as affluent or whatever, however you want to characterize it. It's going to be different for every person, obviously. But basically, like, there's a power imbalance and a sort of like intellectual imbalance, maybe a physiological imbalance too, because like, yeah, being denied nutrition when you're growing up and education stuff, it makes a real difference in a lot of different ways, in a lot of subtle ways and countless ways that are hard to characterize and quantify even a lot of times, but nonetheless they're real. So in those instances where you have this power imbalance, it's sort of intrinsic, just as a side effect of human nature, even whether or not it's real or just sort of virtually real. What you often have because of that, this is a really nice like little landscaping thing here. What you end up getting is like abuse a lot of the times. People who are in a position of power and authority tend to like exploit that power and authority to gain more power and authority, or sexual favors or whatever the hell. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the bottom line is like there's very little oversight, and people care even less about what happens to people who are already like drastically disadvantaged and underprivileged. Wow, this is a really cool little prop here with this like boathouse. So yeah, like, and that's basically what happened. There were these like human aid workers who would go to various underprivileged companies, and maybe NGOs were involved, or non-profit humanitarian organizations, and they would hire contractors, and they were using government grants, and maybe those people that they hired weren't necessarily quality people. They were just people looking to make money, and those people were also on occasion opportunists and potentially sociopaths, even though that's the last kind of person you'd want to have working. And like lapses occurred, lapses in judgment and in the hiring, and it is just like fast and loose, and people are in a situation where maybe they see a situation, they're like, oh, I can take advantage here to either make money or get something I want for myself. Whether it's like some hot native woman that they're like, or indigenous person that they're like, oh, I can get some sex here because I'm in this massively disproportionate like position of authority and power, and they're like at my mercy pretty much, and they took advantage of that, and people were harmed significantly. There was medical abuses happened with like poisons and contamination and pathogens, and people died. And that wasn't because vaccines are bad. That was because humans are bad. I mean, not all humans, obviously, but these particular humans were bad. Bad news, and bad things happened, and that's life. That doesn't mean vaccines are bad, but because of that, like, the damage was incalculable, because it immediately just utterly destroys confidence and goodwill. And what's really crazy, though, it's so much more complicated than this, because sometimes there is no abuse. Sometimes just accidents happen, or what's even worse, and this is something that nobody wants to talk about, at least if they're like of a more liberal persuasion, but since I'm a little more dynamic, I'm gonna touch on it. Like, occasionally people go into these cultures, they're good people, they're good meaning, sound, everything is the way it's supposed to be, but because of the culture itself, whether it's a religious stigma or superstition or just ignorance, the people who are kind of like the cultural leaders in the area, they themselves and turn against the aid organizations, or they don't trust them, maybe because they heard a story of this other aid organization that came in and fucked everyone over. So, like, it's so complex. It's tragic to, like, it's horrible if you try to oversimplify, really. And I think it's unjust to oversimplify, because these situations are just so incredibly complicated and dynamic. And sound bites and Twitter and stuff, they never, I had to get in the water here, they never cover this level of complexity. Everything has to be distilled down. Alright, I'm gonna see if I can go right next door to Land Down Under. It's probably just an empty sim over here. Oh no, there's some stuff. Yeah, I'm kind of the opinion that I feel like if something is so complicated that it can't be easily explained, it shouldn't be easily explained. And it's really just kind of disgusting that our culture is constantly trying to reduce and extract and minimize complexity that's integral to everything important in life, like whether it's interpersonal relationships or ecosystems. The complexity and diversity and messiness is what makes those things awesome and intelligent and functional. You can't take that away, ever. Like, if you take it away, you destroy those things. And yet, like, intellectual, well, I don't know, like pseudo-intellectual progression, which is heavily facilitated by technological advancement, is the polar opposite of that. It is hell-bent on reduction, distillation, and like simplification, extreme simplification of things that are not simple, never will be, and never should be. It's one of those like beach commune things. Oh, the landscaping's kind of nice, very idyllic. So yeah, That's why there's conspiracy theories about vaccines. It's sure as hell not because of Bill Gates and George Soros. And also, like, something really interesting, and this is something that is a personal, like, pet peeve of mine. Influencers, right? Like, people with not enough intelligence, but with a shit ton of influence. Social media people, like there was a study done recently where they reverse engineered all of the like misinformation about vaccines. There's an article out there, you can Google it if you want to look it up, but 14 people, so-called influencers, were responsible for like almost every single instance of viral anti-vaccine propaganda. So these are people who thrive on misinformation and clickbait because this is a really interesting thing. I just learned the other day. I was listening to this podcast, and there's this one researcher. Can't remember what his discipline was. He might have been like a neuroscientist or something. But they did all the science on tracking social media and information distribution. They did this really cool thing where they went to Twitter and they like reverse engineered a whole bunch of viral tweets, like very broad spectrum. It wasn't in any way like uh, cherry picked or anything. And then they created these visual trees because there's so much rich information about social media and propagation and stuff that's freely available through APIs and stuff. They were actually able to trace back like every interaction, whether it was a retweet and a retweet of a retweet, and the timing, the chronology, so they could figure out like how quickly a tweet went viral and trace all the various pathways that the proliferation took. And they found out that like, and this was like the truly terrifying statistic, was that lies, things that were outright false, that even could be openly fact checked, proliferated like it was either 6 or 60 times faster than truth. Like things that could be verified and were actually factual. So, I mean, I think anybody who hears that statistic, or even in the most superficial way, is exposed to social media honestly and has done any sort of even like cursory analysis of waiting for this house to res so I can actually get inside. Maybe I'll just look through the walls. But anyone who's done even the most cursory analysis of social media inherently just knows this is a fact. Like, it's just the truth. Like, clickbait, plausible lies plausible falsehoods is kind of, or compelling lies is what I always think of them as. Compelling lies just travel like wildfire on social media. And this is like an inherent weakness in the human mind, right? No one's necessarily to blame. It's human nature, it's evolution, evolutionary psychology, whatever. Sven, in Newfoundland, nice to see you again. You're not taking the jab, huh? Yeah. I've seen all the propaganda, and thank you for thank you for chiming in, but I'm not buying it, bro. Anyway, we know it's not, there's no ambiguity, there's no way to deny the fact that lies travel faster on social media than the truth. It's just a fact. It's science. It's been proven by science. And that should concern everyone, and especially in an era when basically the life of individuals and the health of society at large are at stake. And I'll bet Sven K. I'll bet you've been vaccinated, right? Already. Not for COVID, but probably for smallpox, mumps, measles. I mean, you're in Newfoundland, right? And that's in Europe, correct? With socialized medicine, where you basically have like some fairly aggressive vaccination programs where you were vaccinated as a child, I would imagine. Just curious. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but you probably do. You probably have some idea. Yeah, anyway, so like these 14 people who are so-called influencers were basically responsible for all of the misinformation about COVID out there. And if you like look up this article and check the list of people, it's likely that you yourself have listened or indirectly been exposed to the propaganda that these 14 people have been like parroting. And you know why they're doing it? It's not because they necessarily believe it. It's because it makes them money. Because, like I was just discussing about how lies travel faster than truth on social media, we all know that. You know what makes money on social media? It's traffic. Because ad revenue is how people make their money on social media, like on YouTube, for example, where we are right now. Like people like Jake Paul and PewDiePie and all those people, they make money because millions of people watch their videos. Millions, hundreds of millions, I don't know, a lot of people watch those videos. And when they watch the video, they see advertising, and then the creator of the video basically gets money for that. Everybody knows how this works. I'm just telling you guys what you already know. But the truth is, it scales, right? So for me, for example, if say I had 10,000 people watch this video, I'd make like $20 maybe if I was lucky off of ad revenue. Not that I monetize my videos, but if I was monetizing my video, I'd make a little bit of money. Now someone like PewDiePie or Jake Paul, they get like 10 million views on a video, they make $50,000. I don't know, it's a lot. It's so much money. It's like unbelievable. These guys are like buying multi-million-dollar mansions on ad revenue. So you can imagine these 14 individuals who have like a podcast or a radio show or are big on Instagram or Twitter or whatever platform they happen to be on. If they tell a compelling lie about a vaccine that they read in some right-wing, rag, and they know that because it's a compelling lie that it's going to get a lot of traffic, they're going to make a lot of money. And the more traffic they get, the more money they make, and the bigger their audience is, etc. It's really like, it's a fucked up business model. And yeah, disproportionate influence, minimal intelligence, an incentive to make money, total disregard for the truth, and no compassion or caring whatsoever for the consequences, and just hell bent on maximizing traffic and revenue is a recipe for disaster. Even if there's a grain of truth to any one of those clickbait lies, it's still gonna do infinitely more damage than if it was not happening. And It's like one of the major tragedies of the 21st century. I am not in support of mandatory vaccinations. That is an extremist point of view, in my opinion. I mean, to have that view is extreme, because I think scientifically it makes absolutely perfect sense to have mandatory vaccinations, especially because society is an organism, and that organism deserves to defend itself. And we have an existential threat in our world right now, and that is viruses that can mutate and can kill a lot of people. COVID right now may not be the worst epidemic or pandemic to ever hit humanity, but that doesn't mean a random mutation can't make it a hell of a lot worse, which is why read crucial. Look it up. In fact, give me a second. 14 people. I'm just Googling this shit. 14 people. Influencers. COVID vaccine. All right, let me get my phone out because I just texted this recently. So sorry for the interruption, but this is important. Okay, 12 people are behind most of the anti-vaxxer disinformation. So that's what I need to Google. Yeah, this article is gonna rock your world, and I feel like, you know, if you're susceptible, and most people are, to disinformation, especially if it's compelling, it doesn't mean you're an idiot. Here, I'm pasting this right now so that everyone can see it if they want to verify. Hey, I just got kicked off the sim. Cool. Banned for life. Oh my god. And here's a perfect example right now. I'm talking about COVID, and look at all this chat activity from Sven here. It's not that Sven is in any way susceptible to misinformation. I'm not saying that, but just the conversation around the controversy generates a lot of activity. And if I was not a scrupulous person, I only cared about making money, I could be like putting this shit in the title of my live stream, trying to drum up activity and controversy as possible. I could be saying all sorts of crazy shit. I could be putting links in my chat stream for conspiracy theories about QAnon and all that crap. And guess what? I'd be getting a lot more traffic than I am now. And ostensibly making more ad revenue over time. But so but just I think it's worth noticing always the causes and effect relationships. Yeah, well, guess what? There's like billions of people on Facebook. It's the worst social media platform. I think Facebook should be like dismantled. It's one of the worst things to ever happen to humanity. Real news, right? Like there's a difference between real and fake news sites. But who gets to decide that, right? I mean, not us. Fact checkers get to decide that. And like, if you really want to know the truth, you should look at the facts, not talk about which news sites are true and which aren't, because guess what? That's just propaganda. You're falling right into the propaganda trap, because once you subscribe to the cult of personality, Yeah, I know. I know you've been on here a long time. I know you're not a fool. I know that. That's why I'm saying, like, I know you're not necessarily susceptible. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And I'm saying the truth is people subscribe to the cult of personality. They think a particular website is telling them the truth in big scare quotes. But what they should really be looking for are the facts, because facts are something that can be objectively verified. I'm also for freedom. Like I was saying, I really do not think that vaccines should be mandatory. I think that's unacceptable. People should always have the right to decline vaccination, even if it's not the right thing for them. But that being said, when you decline the right to vaccination, then you're also putting yourself and others at risk, in which case that has consequences, and you can't just pretend that that's not real. You know what I mean? It's like you have to take if you really want to be completely free in the like libertarian sense, with great freedom comes greater responsibility. So that means you got to be more responsible than people who aren't necessarily as free as you. And being accountable too, like 100% accountable. So if you are not getting vaccinated, then hopefully you're taking every other precaution. Because if you get sick and you spread that disease because you're not vaccinated and other people die, that's on you. And that's like, honestly, that's the only reason I got the vaccine. It wasn't for me. I wasn't worried about dying of COVID. I mean, it's possible. It's not like anyone knows if they're gonna survive when they get COVID. They exclusively tell if someone's high risk or low risk. Not yet. I mean, sure, there will be eventually after there's been more analysis. But I have a lot of people in my life who are older, who are high risk statistically, and I don't want them to get COVID because of me. That's the most compelling reason for me personally to get vaccinated, because when you get vaccinated, you eliminate yourself as a vector. Statistically, I'm not saying like nothing's 100% perfect. So even if you're vaccinated, you can still get infected. Yeah. But like I said, watching news is just news. Anybody can have a news site. Anybody can say anything they want on the news. That doesn't make it a fact. So if you just fact check stuff that you're seeing on news, you find a lot of times that it's not true. And that's why I will never find one source. Yeah, I can decide what's a fact. I mean, everybody does that. It's just human nature. But that doesn't make it a fact, you know? And fact-checking sites are a lot more objective than news sites, because they don't necessarily have a stake in the game, and it's not incentivized, you understand? Because if they publish something that is factual information it can hurt them, they have no incentive, while other sites, when you get ratings or make money, which, I mean, let's be honest, all these news sites that you're citing, that I might cite, they all survive on ad revenue. They're not like, they gotta pay the bills, right? But fact checking is a little bit different. They're not usually making money via ad revenue, and they're pissing a lot of people off. I'm always gonna is gonna piss people off, especially powerful, influential people. And like I was saying before, facts, the difference in a news article or whatever is that one of them is independently and objectively verifiable, and that's facts. Well, I can tell you, at least so far in the United States, no one is being forced to take the COVID vaccine. This is actually a freaking awesome sim. I haven't been here before, have I? Winery Locus Amoeus. I'm going to put the SL URL in the chat just because I think it's a really cool sim. You have to take responsibility for that fact that you have made a decision that has changed your status in society. Yeah, the recovery rate is irrelevant. It's I mean, a lot of people miss this about COVID. They don't understand the risk because they're not epidemiologists. The risk is not that a really small percentage of people could die. The risk is that it spreads super fast and it can mutate, and probably an insidious aspect of the virus is that people can have it and be asymptomatic. So the reason I'm setting you up here, you don't realize that I'm getting to the punchline, is that the virus in its current state is not the real threat. The real threat of COVID is that it mutates in an even more lethal strain, which is not impossible. In fact, there's a lot of strains that have come out of COVID hotbeds that have been incredibly more virulent and more lethal. In fact, I think there's a few in Europe and Brazil, especially because of Bolsonaro and his incredibly inept leadership, and just like Trump, his utter denial of scientific reality has caused a statistical jump in variants, and it's a ticking time bomb, because viruses on one hand they want to spread, so they're kind of like a parasite in the sense that if they kill the host too quickly, then it's a problem, because then it will stop spreading exponentially. But COVID isn't like that. You can carry it for many, many days without having any symptoms and spread it to a lot of people and then die, from a lethal reaction. So that's like the absolute pinnacle of scary viruses, which I think is one of the reasons the reaction from like the scientific community has been so severe, and justifiably so. Yeah, the AstraZeneca fiasco, there's an example of what I was talking about earlier. Human beings, once again, putting a fly in the ointment due to human nature's natural characteristics of greediness and whatnot. AstraZeneca clearly trying to cash in on the sort of unique situation of governments frantically trying to buy an unbelievable quantity of vaccines that could make them a lot of money. And they cut some corners. Everyone is cutting corners on this vaccine, all the vaccines for COVID, because they were rushing, to get it out as quickly as possible. Even the mRNA, like the Pfizer shot that I got, It's it's still on the verges of fringy super science. Um, a lot of the techniques that were used in the vaccine, they have not been extensively studied, especially long term. The science is sound, and like I chose to trust the science because that's what I've always done. Because everything that's good that we have in life nowadays, everything that I enjoy is the product of science. I wouldn't even exist right now if it wasn't for science. Not just because I never would due to agricultural advancements in the 1700s, but because I multiple times in my life I have almost died of a lethal infection that was treated by antibiotics, and that's why I'm here. So I know I know humans aren't perfect. I know that more than most people. I think about it all the time. I know that occasionally corners are cut, bad things happen, like with the AstraZeneca, that was truly horrific, and the blood clots. Yeah, it's you gotta be intelligent. I'm not saying you should just blindly jump into the jaws of death or anything. Do your research. Do what research you can, but also fact checking. Trust but verify. That old, was it like Reagan or Eisenhower or something? Yeah, no one's saying just buy in hook, line, and sinker, but at the same time, like, we live in a consent on some level, even above and beyond the scientific consensus. And at some point, you either buy or you just live in a dream world, honestly. You opt out of civilization, you opt out of the intellectual discourse, and you just decide that, like, I'm going to be this outlier who does not subscribe in any way to a context-based reality, the one that we all live in, the one that we're all forced to live in. I mean, that's cool. If somebody wants to do that, like, sure, fine. Um, as a former anachronihilist, even though I'm recommending people get vaccinated because I think it's the right thing ethically to do and also the smart thing to do, I'm not going to make you do it. I'm not going to be okay with anybody making anybody do anything. I'm just saying advice. That's it. Like, you don't have to take it. I know a lot of people won't, actually. And the compelling lies are always going to outweigh the truth and the facts. That's just the world that we live in right now. The consensus-based reality that we live in. I'm now the outlier. Like, it's kind of funny. I used to be like the nut job. Now I'm the voice of reason. That's how I feel. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the conspiracy theories that I used to believe. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Sven. Like, there's nothing that can be done to contain the virus. I felt exactly the same way at the very beginning of the pandemic. I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to contain it. Ironically, the reason that that's true now is because so many people are refusing to be vaccinated for all the reasons that have been discussed. It's 100% true that COVID will continue to be this, like, recurrent yearly thing. But see, I don't think the way I used to, and the reason that that sort of reasoning isn't as compelling to me is because I don't think in terms of specific instances or events. I think in terms of statistics, and statistically, it doesn't matter if we can quote unquote contain it, because what's really crucial is that we are able to statistically reduce the probability of new worse mutations, and stay at the reservoir, which is a sort of like dynamically growing real-time phenomenon of, depending on how many people are infected at any given time and how many people are not vaccinated, specifically people who don't have protection against yeah, you know, here's the thing. Top doctor is kind of a catchphrase, you know, because it's the same with climate change. There are a lot of so-called top doctors or top scientists who, and I'll tell you, there's a couple of reasons for why this happens. Sometimes the top scientist or whatever just loses their mind. Most of the time it's because, like I was saying before, they're unscrupulous and they see an opportunity for increasing their own notoriety and financial options by becoming this like celebrity figure, you know. What do you mean no facts? I'm not giving you any facts at all, honestly. What I have said repeatedly is do your own fact checking, do your own research. And like, I'm not call me out all you want. And yes, people are free to make up their own minds. I think I was pretty clear about that just now when I was talking about being an anachronist who's never gonna former anachronist who's never going to tell you what to do or support anybody making you do stuff. Like, it's up to you. Ultimately, it's always up to you. Like, I can't take your power away. I'm just some rando on the internet, right? But I'm saying, like, some don't like subscribe to this like cult of personality sort of idea that there's one true source out there, or there's some top expert, because that's not how reality works. Like I said, consensus-based reality, statistical models. Take a look at the scientific community on the planet right now. All the top scientists in the community. Okay, see that's where we get where we mess up, because saying like all of the top scientists or whatever, it's not all. Like you were saying before, there's some top scientist who is an outlier, right, and has a completely different opinion than everybody else. That is the exact opposite of statistical analysis, is saying that an outlier, a single outlier, or even like a percentage of the total pool of experts, if say it's 10% of all the experts in the world, is basically saying like vaccinations are bad or dangerous or what have you, or ineffective, whatever they're saying, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they're like 10% of the entire population within this category. So like if you have 90% of all the experts in a given field all saying the same thing, and you have any faith whatsoever in humanity, you're going to really strongly consider the possibility that the 10% of outliers who are saying the exact opposite are almost certainly wrong for completely different reasons than the science. That is not to say that occasionally yeah, you tried. You tried. It's too late, man. I've already been vaccinated. Come on. What are you trying to prove here? I'm just kidding. But yeah, I have already been vaccinated. It's too late. Which eventually I'm going to tell you about all my symptoms, so stay tuned. Yeah, so like statistical anomaly, one outlier in an entire community is onto something, and that's why it's a compelling lie, right? Because occasionally one outlier like Galileo or whoever is saying like, but that's not the world we live in anymore. This is not the science of the 1800s or the 1700s or the 1600s. This is modern science. There's a lot more analysis happening. There's a lot more eyes. That's why I feel personally that I can trust in certain things like modern vaccine technology. That's why I was willing to take the mRNA vaccine, because science isn't what it used to be. And outliers are borderline lunatics, to be honest. Occasionally, they may have some like additional insight into the process, but that doesn't mean that their outlier theories, which are basically going against the stream of like an entire global community of data and science and their peers, that there's any truth to that. Like, human beings can be flawed. That's just something that we know to be true. And it's more likely statistically that the human beings that are going against the global consensus are the ones who are not right. And that was in the past because science was a lot less rigorous and people were a lot more ignorant in many, many ways. I mean, yeah, of course, in the past, people thought that the sun was or the earth was the center of the universe and that everything revolved around the earth. But, I mean, do you think that kind of reasoning would hold up today when we have, like, thousands of satellites and telescopes and all that stuff? Of course not. And it's the same with even this fringy super science like mRNA. There's tens of thousands of researchers and scientists around the world who are like analyzing all this stuff in depth all the time. It's not foolproof. There's still a margin for error, but like I said, statistical thinking, you're not like gonna be focusing on the outliers. You're gonna be focusing on the statistical probabilities, and it's hard to argue with those after a certain point. And all I can say is like it's a kind of level of perception that you come to over time. It's not something that can be communicated, not in yeah, see, you say a top doctor, but what about the top doctors, plural? Like, there are millions of doctors on this planet, and how many doctors are telling the people of this planet that getting vaccinated is not a good idea? It's like a infinitesimal I would say even irrelevant proportion. Yeah, you know what my favorite quote is about statistics, just to go total counterpoint? So there's like 3 types of statistics. Or no, sorry. Wow, I really butchered this joke. There's 3 types of lies, and I just gave away the punchline ahead of time. There's lies, there's damned lies, and then there's statistics. So yeah, see, this is another plausible lie, or not plausible, compelling lie. The compelling is that statistics are unreliable and you always be skeptical. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be, because we all know that statistics sometimes do mislead and there's cherry picking and blah blah blah. It's like there's statistics on that too. To make it a little meta. But like I was saying earlier, is at some point you have to subscribe to consensus-based reality or just be a perpetual outlier living side of reality. So it's a choice. Everyone's free to make it. I'm not telling you what to choose. I can't make you choose. Look, there's just as many Nazis on the right as there are on the left.